The hiss of the tranquilizer dart was so close to Ariana Shrewdman's ear, she felt the whisper of its passage against her skin. A raw scream tore from her throat as a gnarled root snagged the heel of her absurdly expensive shoe. She met the forest floor with a brutal impact, the sound of tearing silk followed by the clumsy tangle of her fur coat twisting around her arms as footsteps hammered the earth behind her. They were getting closer. Please. Ariana choked out a sob, catching in her throat as she clawed backward through the dirt and decaying leaves. Her once perfectly coiffed hair was now a wild mess of twigs and filth. Please don't hurt me. Please, she whispered again, just as a towering shadow blotted out the light. She flinched, arms flying up to shield her face, bracing for the sting of the needle for the encroaching darkness. But the end didn't come. Instead, a deep, resonant voice, impossibly calm, almost detached, cut through her terror. What are you doing in my forest? Her eyes snapped open. The man looming over her was not one of her hunters. He was a giant and easy 6'4", with a frame so broad it eclipsed the afternoon sun slicing through the pine canopy. His skin was the color of rich earth, and his arms were coiled with the kind of dense muscle forged by relentless, punishing work. Thick black dreadlocks were tied back at the nape of his neck, but it was his eyes that stole her breath, a startling, piercing blue that seemed to dissect her soul. He assessed her with an unnerving, clinical detachment, clad in cargo pants, black combat boots, and a simple tank top that did little to hide arms that looked fully capable of snapping a man in two. Strapped to his back was a woven pack overflowing with wild mushrooms, berries, and other foraged plants. He was like some primal warrior ripped from the pages of ancient myth. And Ariana Shrewdman, a woman who exclusively dated movie stars, pro athletes, and trust fund heirs, felt a genuine, terrifying flutter in her chest for the first time in her pampered life. Help me. She lunged her hands, clutching his leg in pure desperation. Please, you have to help me. They're trying to... A sharp voice cut her off. There she is. Three men in black tactical gear crashed through the undergrowth, the leader leveling a tranquilizer rifle squarely at Ariana. Step aside, the point man snarled at the giant. We've got business with the lady. The mountain of a man didn't so much as twitch. And what business is that? He rumbled, his voice still maddeningly placid. Not your concern, friend. Just walk away and no one gets hurt. I'm not your friend, the stranger stated flatly. Losing patience, the second man shoved the stranger's shoulder, trying to force him back. It was like pushing against a granite cliff. The man didn't yield an inch. The motion, however, was just enough to tilt his pack, sending his meticulously gathered food scattering across the forest floor. For the first time, an emotion flickered across the stranger's stoic face. Annoyance, pure and undiluted. I spent 4 hours gathering those, he said, his voice dropping into a dangerous register. Pick them up. The armed men traded glances before bursting into condescending laughter. You've got to be kidding me, the leader sneered. Who the hell do you think you... The words died in his throat because the stranger moved. And as Ariana watched from the ground, all fear for her own life evaporated, replaced by sheer awe at the brutal, elegant violence that unfolded before her. He intercepted the first man's punch, twisting the wrist in a single fluid motion that sent the man crashing into a tree with a wet, sickening crack. The second attacker charged, but the stranger was already gone, sidestepping the clumsy lunge with contemptuous ease. A single precise strike to the solar plexus crumpled the man to the ground. The third rushed in, swinging a tactical baton, and the stranger disarmed him in 2 impossibly fast movements. The first deflected the weapon. The second swept the man's legs out from under him, sending him down hard. The entire confrontation was over in less than 15 seconds. 3 highly trained operatives lay broken and unconscious on the forest floor. The stranger dusted off his hands and turned his attention to the leader, who was now scrambling to bring his dart gun to bear. The gun hissed. In a move that defied belief, the stranger plucked the dart from the air, catching it between his thumb and forefinger as if it were a dandelion seed. The leader's face drained of all color. He dropped his weapon and fled crashing through the woods like a panicked animal. The stranger inspected the tiny needle in his hand, then his piercing blue eyes fell back to Ariana. A tranquilizer. They weren't trying to kill you. Whoever's after you wants you alive. With that, he knelt and began calmly gathering his spilled mushrooms, utterly indifferent to the unconscious bodies littering the ground or the traumatized woman trembling at his feet. Ariana stared in disbelief. Wait, she cried, scrambling to her feet and swaying on a broken heel. You're just going to leave. Not my problem, he replied gently, placing a mushroom into his basket. They tried to kidnap you. I stopped them. You're welcome. And with that, he turned and strode deeper into the woods. Wait, please. She kicked off the useless, ruined heels and stumbled after him, her shredded dress snagging on every branch. I can't go back. They'll just send more of them. I need a place to hide just until I can sort this out. He didn't break stride. I'll pay you. Don't need money. Then what do you need? That made him stop. He turned his face an unreadable mask of stone. For people to leave me the hell alone, he said, his voice dangerously low, as he gestured to the silent woods around them. That's why I live out here, so I don't have to deal with people exactly like you. People like me. A flash of indignant fire cut through her terror. You have no idea who I am. Those piercing blue eyes raked over her, cataloging the designer dress, the perfect manicure, the expensive jewels still glittering on her wrists. I know your type, he said, his voice a low rumble. Some pampered politician's daughter, or maybe a billionaire's latest acquisition. Either way, you're wealthy, entitled, and completely accustomed to the world bending to your will. Ariana's throat constricted. His words had struck so unnervingly close to home it was frightening. You have a problem with the rich, she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I despise them, he stated, the words cold and absolute. Especially the political variety. Well, that's certainly complicated matters. That's not me, Ariana started to say, then stopped herself cold. If he knew her father's name, he'd leave her to the wolves without a second thought. I'm not what you think I am. It doesn't matter what you are. You are not my concern. He began to turn away. A raw, clawing panic seized her. She could not go back. Her father's instructions had been absolute: stay invisible until after the election. If those men found her again, please, the word tore from her throat, a ragged whisper. I'm begging you. There is nowhere else for me to go. The stranger paused, the powerful muscles across his shoulders tensing. Why are they hunting you? He asked, his back still to her. Ariana's mind raced, desperate for a convincing lie. My father, she said, letting the genuine fear in her veins bleed into her tone. He owes an obscene amount of money to some very unforgiving people. They're using me as collateral to force his hand, but he can't get it. He just needs time to pull the funds together, and I need a place to disappear until he does. The stranger pivoted slowly, his intense blue gaze scrutinizing her face. You don't look like you've known a single day of hardship, he observed. Our situation wasn't always so dire, Ariana countered, thinking on her feet. Things fell apart recently. Terrible investments. My father made promises he couldn't keep to the absolute worst kind of men. It was a half-truth at least. Her father had made countless promises to the wrong people, just not the sort she was describing. The stranger held her gaze for a long, heavy moment, clearly weighing the truth of her words before releasing a deep, reluctant sigh. What's your name? Ariana. Your full name? Of course he'd ask. A man this guarded would never settle for less. For one heart-stopping second, her mind was a terrifying void. Then her eyes landed on his basket of foraged goods. Wild berries, mushrooms, dark forest greens. Moss, she blurted out, snatching the first nature-inspired name she could grasp. Ariana Moss. Ariana Bailey Moss. The stranger's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, as if he were testing the weight and feel of the name. Ariana held his gaze, praying her thundering heartbeat wasn't visible in her throat. Moss, he repeated flatly. It's a family name, she added quickly. My great-grandfather was Irish. I think it means something like son of Moses, or so I'm told. But my grandmother always joked it was because our family tends to grow on you whether you want us to or not. She was rambling, a dead giveaway. She always rambled when she was lying. But the stranger simply studied her for another silent moment, then gave a single sharp nod. Fine, Ariana Moss, he said, turning back to the forest path. You can stay for now until your father resolves his mess. Relief washed through Ariana with such force her knees almost buckled. Thank you, she breathed out. Thank you so much. I promise I won't cause you any trouble. You won't even know I'm here. The look he shot back at her suggested he was certain that was a lie. Follow me, he said, and try to keep pace. They walked in a tense silence for several minutes before Ariana dared to speak again. Can I at least know your name? She asked, rushing to match his long, powerful strides. Does it make a difference? I'd like to know the name of the man who just saved my life. Silence descended again, thick and heavy, before he answered with clear reluctance. Blae. Blae. Ariana repeated the name, feeling foreign on her tongue. Is that your actual name, or is that just the only name I need to know? A faint smile touched Ariana's lips despite her crushing exhaustion and fear. Fair enough, Blae, she said. His sharp blue eyes sliced toward her, but he offered no reply. And Ariana sent a silent prayer of thanks to whatever primal instinct had supplied her with that lie about her last name. Because if Blae loathed politicians with the passion she'd heard in his voice, he would eject her the instant he discovered she was Ariana Shrewdman, daughter of Senator Dwight Shrewdman, the very politician currently campaigning to be governor. He would toss her out of his sanctuary so fast it would make her head spin. The pure contempt in his eyes had sent an icy chill down her spine. No, for her own survival, Ariana Moss was who she had to be. They walked for more than an hour before the trees parted to reveal a small clearing. A cottage was nestled amongst the pines. It was small and rustic, but clearly well maintained. A wisp of smoke curled lazily from a stone chimney. A vegetable garden flourished along one side, and dark solar panels gleamed on the roof. Split logs were stacked with geometric perfection against an exterior wall. "You live here?" Ariana asked, taking in the scene. All alone, Blae completely ignored her question as he pushed open the front door. The interior was sparse but impeccably clean. There was a wood stove in the corner, a compact kitchen, and a table set with one single chair. A bookshelf was filled with a strange combination of survival manuals and classic literature. Everything was organized with an almost obsessive military-like precision. Everything was immaculate. "The bed's yours," Blae announced, placing his basket on the counter. "I've got a blanket for you, I'll just take the floor." Ariana countered, but he cut her off. "That's not up for debate. You're under my roof, you follow my rules, we eat the same food. You don't go outside without me. And if you don't know what something is, you leave it alone. And you will not under any circumstances talk my ear off." A small smile tugged at Ariana's lips. "I think I can manage that." Blae's expression was pure disbelief. He was right to be doubtful. The next morning, Ariana was jolted awake by a series of heavy rhythmic thuds from just outside. She pushed herself up from a bed that was far more comfortable than she'd expected, cocooned in the warm blankets he'd given her. Blae had left himself with just a single thin sheet. She squinted at the old wind-up clock on the shelf. 5:30. In the morning. "You have to be kidding me," Ariana groaned. Dragging herself to the window, she peered out. There in the clearing next to the cottage was Blae, shirtless, powering his way through a ferociously intense workout. He moved from push-ups to pull-ups using a thick branch he'd suspended between two trees. Then came the burpees, followed by an exercise that involved him hoisting a massive log as if it were a feather. A sheen of sweat coated his dark skin, carving out every single muscle rippling across his back, his arms, his shoulders, and his abdomen. Ariana felt her throat tighten. She had been with her share of men actors sculpted by personal trainers, athletes with chiseled abs, trust fund kids, who treated the gym like a second home. But not one of them looked like this. Blae moved with the terrifying grace of controlled violence. Each motion was precise, deliberate, and utterly devastating. His entire body was a finely honed weapon, and watching him wield it was utterly mesmerizing. When he finally concluded his regimen, he snatched a towel and vanished around the side of the cottage. A moment later, Ariana heard the splash of running water. She would later find out it was frigid water, because Blae apparently felt the need to brutalize himself with ice-cold showers every single morning. A few minutes later, he strode back inside his dreads, still damp, dressed in a pair of clean cargo pants and a gray Henley that seemed shrink-wrapped to his powerful physique. His piercing blue eyes locked onto hers instantly. "You're up," he stated plainly. "Breakfast will be ready in 5 minutes." He turned to the kitchen and started preparing their meal with the same cold efficiency he brought to his physical training. Ariana was transfixed as he sliced apples into perfectly uniform pieces, arranged a handful of berries in a bowl with an artist's precision, and laid out slices of what appeared to be homemade bread. "Do you get up at 5:30 every day?" she finally asked. "I do. But why? It builds discipline. But you don't have a schedule to keep. Discipline isn't about obligation. It's about choice." He placed the bowl of fruit and the bread on the small table. "Eat." Ariana sat staring at the offering. It was undeniably healthy, fresh, and bursting with nutrients. It was also the blandest-looking breakfast she had ever encountered, but her hunger was so sharp she devoured every last crumb. Once they'd finished, Blae presented her with a folded stack of clothes. "These should work for you," he said, his tone deliberately flat. "They're worn, but they're clean." The garments were obviously made for a man. A flannel shirt, another pair of cargo pants, and thick socks, all of it showed signs of wear, but was perfectly cared for. And they were clearly not his. They were at least a full size smaller than what he wore. "Thank you," Ariana murmured. The way Blawan's jaw clenched told her that these clothes had belonged to someone important, someone he had lost. When she re-entered the main room dressed in the oversized outfit, Blawan gave her one curt nod. That's better. You won't be tripping over a dress if we have to leave in a hurry. Over the following days, Ariana began to grasp the sheer intensity of Blawan's self-imposed order. He rose at exactly 5:30 each morning and trained for a precise 90 minutes. He would then wash himself with freezing water from the creek behind the house. Ariana tried it once and lasted all of 4 seconds before bolting back inside, shivering and swearing. To her shock, Blawan had actually cracked a tiny fleeting smile at that. His diet consisted solely of what he could grow, find, or occasionally hunt. It was Spartan food, almost completely unseasoned. Just bread, vegetables, fruit, and sometimes meat cooked with nothing more than a pinch of salt. Every object in his cottage had its designated spot. Every tool was flawlessly maintained. The books on his shelf were perfectly aligned. The firewood was stacked with an almost obsessive geometric neatness. Even the few dishes he owned were washed, dried, and put away the second a meal was over. It was like witnessing a private religion of self-control, one so severe it felt more like a form of penance. You seriously don't have a TV? Ariana asked on their third day together, scanning the walls for the 10th time. Not even a radio. I have a ham radio for emergencies, nothing else. How do you keep from going completely stir-crazy? Blawan glanced up from the blade he was methodically sharpening. I read, I train, I tend to the land. I have no need for manufactured distractions to feel alive. That just sounds lonely. Loneliness is a state of mind. Solitude is a skill. Ariana watched him closely. Is that really what you believe? Blawan's blue eyes narrowed into slits. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing. Ariana backpedaled. Just thinking. But it was too late. She was beginning to see the fine fractures in his fortress. She saw it in the way he would sometimes just freeze his gaze, lost in the distance. And she saw it in the way his hands would curl into white-knuckled fists when he thought she wasn't paying attention. He skirted around the edges of the cottage, especially the small bedroom she now occupied, as if crossing the threshold was physically painful. This was no hermit embracing isolation. This was a man on the run. Then 4 days into her confinement, Blaze declared he was heading into town. There's an outpost about an hour from here, he stated, his eyes scanning a list. I make a supply run once a month for anything I can't grow or hunt. You're staying put. Can I please come with you? The words tumbled out of Ariana's mouth before he could even finish. No, please, I can't take another minute in this cabin. It's been 4 days. The walls are closing in. You'll manage. Blaze, please, she begged. I could wear something different. No one would ever know it was me. Just for a little while to see something other than these 4 walls. Blaze stared at her as if she'd just proposed setting the cottage on fire. A disguise. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Yes, I can hide my hair, put on some sunglasses. Whatever you need me to do, I'm literally on my knees here. Ariana pressed her palms together, deploying the wide-eyed, desperate look that had been her secret weapon for years, a look that had never failed her before. Blaze's eyes bored into hers for a long moment, a war waging behind them before he let out a defeated sigh. All right, but you do exactly what I say. You do not leave my side. You make yourself invisible, and when I say it's time to go, we are gone, no questions asked. Is that clear? Crystal clear. Ariana's face lit up. Blaze grumbled something that sounded suspiciously like, this is a terrible idea, as he turned away. He had no idea how right he was. An hour later, she was bouncing in the passenger seat of his battered pickup truck, the scent of pine and old oil filling the cab. A worn baseball cap was crammed down over her normally perfect hair. Huge sunglasses hid her face, and one of his coarse flannel shirts swallowed her frame. I look like a lumberjack's awkward teenage son, she muttered, catching her reflection in the cracked wing mirror. You look forgettable, he shot back. That's the entire point. The outpost was a sleepy mountain town named Pine Ridge, consisting of little more than a single dusty main street with a general store, a hardware shop, and a diner with a faded sign. Blaze killed the engine and pinned her with a look. You stick to me like glue. You don't say a word to anyone. 30 minutes tops. Then we're gone. Aye, aye, Captain, she replied, offering a lazy, sarcastic salute. The look on Blaze's face screamed that he was already second-guessing this entire trip. The moment they stepped inside the general store, Ariana's jaw dropped. It was a portal to another era. Worn wooden floorboards creaked underfoot. Shelves overflowed with practical goods, and a pot-bellied stove radiated warmth in a corner where old-timers were deep in a game of checkers. Blaze navigated the aisles with a familiar no-nonsense purpose, his movements swift and efficient. He collected his essentials, flour, salt, coffee batteries, and fresh bandages. Ariana trailed in his wake, a silent shadow, until a splash of color from the clothing section caught her eye. "Oh, wow," she whispered, pulled toward a rack of colorful shirts as if by an invisible string. "Ariana." Blaze's voice was a low warning. "Necessities only." But his words were lost on her. She was already pressing a brilliant blue shirt against his dark-clad chest. "This would be incredible on you," she declared, her head cocked to the side as she studied him. "It's the exact color of your eyes." Blaze stared at the shirt as if it were a venomous snake. "I don't do color. I've noticed your entire collection seems to be composed of black charcoal and slightly darker black. Don't you ever get tired of looking like you're headed to a funeral?" "No." "Well, too bad, because I'm getting it for you." Before he could protest, Ariana snatched the blue one and added a forest green, a deep burgundy, and a rich burnt orange to the pile. "Think of it as rent," she announced. "I don't need your rent." "And I don't need your permission," she countered. Blaze looked ready to fight her on it, but the store owner, a gentle-faced older woman, chose that moment to smile at them. "You two are just the sweetest couple," she said, her voice warm. "We're not," Blaze began, but Ariana cut him off with a dazzling smile, linking her arm through his. "Why, thank you so much. I have to work to keep up with him. He's so handsome, isn't he?" The old woman laughed. "He certainly is. You're a fortunate young lady." Ariana felt the muscle in Blaze's arm tighten like a steel cable, but he didn't shake her off. Progress, she thought. As he was paying, she darted over to the women's aisle and swiftly gathered a few necessities of her own. Real clothes in her size, some underwear, and the simple toiletries she'd been dreaming of. She carried her small haul to the counter, ready to pull out her card, but stopped as Blaze's brow furrowed in disapproval. "You can't pay for that," he stated quietly. "I have my card," she whispered back, before the realization dawned. "Oh, right, it can be traced." Ariana chewed on her lower lip, her gaze falling on the small stack of items that represented a return to normalcy. With a sigh that spoke of deep resignation, Blaze took out his worn leather wallet and placed her things with his. "I promise I'll pay you back," she insisted. "And how do you plan to do that?" he countered. "As soon as my father takes care of—" "Just forget it." Blaze cut her off, his tone sharp. "Just don't get used to it." But as they carried the bags back to the truck, a wide smile spread across Ariana's face. "What's so funny?" Blaze demanded, noticing her grin. "Nothing," she said, her smile softening. "I just— Thank you for getting me out of the cabin, and for the clothes, and for not being the complete monster you try so hard to be." A muscle jumped in Blaze's jaw. "I'm not kind," he bit out. "I'm practical. You were out of clothes, so I bought you clothes. End of story." "Of course," Ariana replied, her smile unwavering. "Whatever helps you sleep at night." The rumble of the engine was the only sound on the drive home until Ariana finally broke the silence. "So how long have you been hiding out in these mountains?" she asked. "A while." "What's a while? Are we talking years or decades?" "Long enough," he deflected. "Tell me, were you born this inquisitive, or is this a new thing?" The corner of Blaze's mouth twitched, threatening to betray him with a smile. "You generate enough conversation for two people," he observed. "Well, one of us has to," she retorted. "Otherwise, the silence in that cabin would be completely unbearable." "I prefer the silence." "No," Ariana corrected softly, her voice suddenly serious. "You prefer the penance. There's a big difference." Blaze's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "You don't know the first thing about me. Then enlighten me. Anything. Where did you even come from? Is there a family somewhere? What were you doing with your life before you went full-on recluse?" "Recluse? Hey, you live by yourself on a mountain. You actively avoid other humans. I'm assuming you survive on a diet of wild berries and intense brooding, if the shoe fits." A short, sharp laugh escaped him, a sound he instantly tried to smother, but it was too late. It was real. A thrill of victory shot through Ariana. "There it is," she said, her voice flushed with triumph. "So you do have a laugh in you. I was beginning to have my doubts. Don't get used to it. Way too late. I am now making it my personal mission to get you to laugh genuinely at least once a day." "God help me," Blaze muttered. But Ariana would have sworn she saw the shadow of a smile touch his lips. If you have a feeling Ariana is about to drive Blaze crazy in the best possible way, comment below with "Good luck, Blaze." And if you are already completely invested in their chemistry, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. Hit that like button if you are counting the seconds until Ariana shatters those walls he's built up. Things are about to escalate. That evening, Ariana decided to host a fashion show for an audience of one profoundly disinterested man. "So what's the verdict?" she asked, giving a small twirl in her new jeans and a well-fitting t-shirt. Blaze glanced up from his book for less than a second. "They cover you. They're sufficient. Just sufficient. I was personally aiming for cute. My sincerest congratulations." Ariana rolled her eyes and dramatically collapsed onto the floor near the wood stove where Blaze occupied his single armchair. "You know, the average man would at least pretend to be interested in how a woman looks. I am not the average man. No kidding." She studied his profile. "Why won't you even try on the shirts I got for you?" "Because the shirts I currently own are perfectly functional, all of which are various depressing shades of black and gray." "Oh, come on, live a little. Just wear the blue one tomorrow." "Please, no." "How about the green one?" "No." "Fine, be a hermit." Ariana stretched out on her back, staring up at the ceiling. "Can I ask you something real?" "You're going to anyway. Why did you actually agree to let me stay here?" "You obviously despise people. You worship your solitude, and I am by any objective measure incredibly annoying." So what gives Blaze was silent for what felt like an eternity. "Because allowing someone to be taken on my watch, it goes against my training," he finally said. "Your training?" She saw him go rigid, instantly aware he'd said too much. "It's nothing," he said, his voice sharp. "Forget it." But her mind was already connecting the dots. His training, his military-grade precision, the lethal way he fought, the obsessive way he organized everything, the network of scars on his arms. "You were in the service," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Weren't you?" Blaze's ice-blue eyes met hers, and they were filled with a clear warning. "Drop it, Ariana." "I said drop it." The absolute finality in his voice forced her to swallow every question she had, for the time being at least. The following days settled into an unspoken routine. Blaze would be up at dawn, pushing through a brutal workout. Ariana took to watching him from the window each morning, memorizing the poetry of his muscles in motion, the incredible power simmering under every controlled movement. One morning he caught her looking. "You're watching again," he stated, not missing a single beat in his set of pull-ups. "You're doing something worth watching." Ariana shot back without a hint of shame. Blaze dropped from the bar, grabbing a towel, his expression completely unreadable. "If you find physical conditioning so fascinating, you should join me." Ariana's eyes lit up. "For real, you have an abundance of nervous energy. It would be more productive to channel it." "Are you just saying I'm annoying?" "I'm saying you speak more than any human I've ever encountered, and I suspect physical exhaustion might be an effective remedy." Ariana grinned. "So you want to train me? I want you to stop bouncing off my walls. The training is just a means to achieve that." "When do we begin?" "Tomorrow, 5:30. Ariana's smile froze on her face. "In the morning, that is the time I train. Is afternoon training not a thing?" "Number," Ariana groaned. "You are going to kill me." "Probably I am," Blaze agreed easily. "But you'll be too tired to talk, which makes it a worthwhile risk." The next morning at 5:30 on the dot, Ariana dragged her protesting body from her warm bed. She threw on the most athletic-looking outfit she possessed and stumbled out into the frigid air. Blaze was already in motion, warming up with a fluid series of stretches that spoke of years of practice. When he noticed her, one of his eyebrows ticked upward. "You actually showed up," he observed. "I am a woman of my word," Ariana replied through a jaw-cracking yawn. "Even when my word is given under extreme duress. Nobody forced you. You manipulated me with your dark and mysterious reverse psychology." "That's basically force." A ghost of a smile touched Blaze's lips. "We'll start with the absolute basics. Show me your fighting stance." Ariana had absolutely no clue what a proper stance entailed, so she did her best impression by planting her feet, squaring her shoulders, and putting her fists up awkwardly. Blaze circled her slowly, his piercing blue eyes cataloging every flaw. "Your feet are too narrow. Your center of gravity is off." He tapped her ankle with the toe of his boot. "Wider, shoulder width apart." Ariana complied. "Bend your knees. You're too stiff." A fight is fluid, it's motion. "You're standing like a statue." She bent her knees lower, hands higher. "Protect your face." She raised her fists. Blaze continued to circle her, studying her form as if she were a tactical problem he was determined to solve. Then he stepped inside her guard. He moved in so close that Ariana could feel the intense heat radiating from his entire body, and the air between them suddenly felt charged. You're off balance, he murmured, his voice a low rumble. May I? May you what? In response, Blawan's large hand settled on her hip, while the other grasped her shoulder, guiding her into position with movements that were both precise and utterly impersonal. Ariana's breath hitched in her throat. She could feel the warmth of his hands seeping through her thin shirt, feel the heat radiating from his body now mere inches away. Yet his piercing blue eyes were locked on her form, assessing her alignment with a clinical focus. He was the picture of professionalism, completely detached. But for Ariana, detachment was the furthest thing from her mind. Better, Blae declared, taking a step back. All right, a basic punch. Show me your fist. Ariana complied, tucking her thumb inside her fingers. No, you'll shatter your thumb doing that. Blae gently took her hand, carefully unfolding her fingers to wrap them around her thumb. Like this. Keep it tight, but not stiff. You want the impact on your first two knuckles. For the next 20 minutes, they drilled nothing but basic punches, which then led to kicks and finally defensive blocks. By the time he called a halt to the session, Ariana was drenched in sweat, her lungs burning, but a thrilling sense of vitality coursed through her veins. You're a quick study, Blae commented, and for the first time she detected an undertone of respect in his voice. My grandmother always said a woman needs to know how to defend herself, Ariana managed to say between breaths. She would be proud. She was a wise woman. From that day forward, their mornings were dedicated to training, and through it, Ariana began to see a whole new dimension of Blae. She saw glimpses of the commander he once was, authoritative without being cruel, demanding yet always fair. He would push her beyond what she thought were her limits, and then even further, but he was always there to steady her when she faltered. In one particular session during a grappling exercise, Ariana actually managed to break free from his powerful hold. Blae's eyebrows shot up. Good, do it again. I did it once, can't we? Once is a fluke, twice is skill. Again. By the 10th repetition, she could slip from his grasp with fluid grace every single time. Better, Blae acknowledged. You learn fast. You're a good teacher. For a split second, something in his blue eyes thawed. A flicker of warmth there and then gone buried again beneath that stony mask he always wore. But Ariana had caught it, and that one fragile glimpse gave her a sliver of hope. One afternoon with Blae, one occupied outside splitting firewood, Ariana allowed her curiosity to lead her on a more thorough exploration of the cottage. Until now, she had respected his privacy, resisting the urge to pry. But a curious nature was etched into her very soul. Inside the small bedroom she'd been using, she opened the closet, hoping to find something to pass the time. What she discovered instead was a military uniform, one clearly too small for Blae. The name tape stitched above the pocket read Garrison. Ariana carefully lifted it from the hanger, her fingers tracing the crisp fabric. It was impeccably preserved, like a relic in a museum, something cherished. On an impulse one she would later recognize as monumentally foolish, Ariana decided to try it on. The uniform was too large for her, but not excessively so. After rolling up the sleeves and buttoning the jacket, she examined her reflection in the small mirror. For just a moment, she felt a strange kinship with this person, this Garrison. Clearly, it was someone Blae had held dear, someone of great importance. Just then, the bedroom door creaked open behind her. Ariana turned a smile on her face. Blae, look. But the look on Blae's face froze the words in her throat. It was pure, unfiltered rage. Take it off, he said, his voice a lethal whisper. Take it off, Blae roared, closing the distance between them in two long strides. No one had ever screamed at Ariana like that in her entire life. She had never witnessed a person's face twist into such a terrifying mask of fury. She stumbled back, her hands trembling uncontrollably as she fumbled with the jacket's buttons. I'm sorry, she stammered, her voice barely audible. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You had no right. Blae's hands clamped down on her shoulders, not painfully, but with enough force to rattle her to her core. You had no right to touch that. Tears welled up and spilled down her cheeks. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Her fingers felt clumsy and useless against the buttons. She couldn't get the jacket off fast enough, sobbing openly now as she ripped at the fabric in her panic. The pants were next kicked away with a desperate shove until she was left standing in her tank top and shorts, her body racked with sobs. I'm sorry, she whispered again, her hands shaking as she carefully folded the uniform. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I found it, and I was just curious, and I'm so sorry. Through a blur of tears, she held the neatly folded uniform out to him. Blae accepted it, his touch surprisingly gentle, though the storm of fury had yet to recede from his face. And then his eyes fell on her, truly seeing her standing there, undressed, crying as if her heart were shattering. The rage seemed to evaporate from his expression, replaced by a look of utter horror. "Ariana," he breathed, his voice raw. "I'll leave." Ariana choked out through her sobs, her entire body trembling like a leaf in a storm. In her entire 23 years of existence, not a single person had ever raised their voice to her. She couldn't stand being the cause of the stoic Blae's loss of control, especially not like this, so different from the scenarios she had been imagining for days. "I'll be gone by morning. You won't have to see me again." "I'm so sorry. I never meant to make you angry. I'm so sorry." "Stop." Blae one carefully placed the uniform on the bed and turned back to her. "Ariana, stop." But the apologies and tears wouldn't cease. So Blae one did the very last thing she ever would have predicted. He pulled her into his arms. Ariana went rigid with shock as his strong arms wrapped around her, his hands resting on her back, holding her as if she were made of glass. "I'm the one in who's sorry, pa," he murmured into her hair. "I never should have yelled at you like that. You had no idea." "Whose was it?" Her question was a breath of air against the fabric of his shirt. For what felt like an eternity, Blas said nothing. "My little brother's." Ariana eased back, tilting her head to meet his gaze. "Garrison. He was just 22. The name was an empty echo in the room. He followed me into the service, looked up to me, put his life in my hands." What happened?" As if her question pulled him back into the storm, his arms clamped around her, holding on like she was the only thing keeping him from being swept away. "Syria, we were stationed at a forward operating base. We got intel, a planned insurgent attack. We put in a request for everything, more ammo, med supplies, backup. The works." A muscle in his jaw jumped. The request went up the chain, all the way to some desk jockeys in suits who decided that saving a few bucks was worth more than our lives. "They delayed the shipment," he said, and Ariana felt her own heart seize in her chest. 3 days later, all hell broke loose. We held them off for 18 straight hours, but then the ammo ran dry. The med kits were empty. We had nothing left. His voice dropped to a ghost of a whisper. When the relief convoy finally rolled in, I was the only one still breathing. And just barely. 23 men gone. Garrison was one of them. "Oh, Blaze," she breathed, the name a soft ache. I held on to his uniform, a couple of his other things. "It's all I have left." He finally pulled away, his gaze falling upon her, those blue eyes, a window into a private hell. "That's why I lost it. It wasn't you. It's what that uniform means to me." In response, Ariana raised her hands, framing his face, her touch gentle. "I am so, so sorry," she whispered. "For your brother, for all of your men. And I am desperately sorry that I wore his uniform. I had no idea. The last thing I would ever want to do is disrespect his memory." He leaned into her hands, a flicker of solace crossing his face as his eyes closed. "I know you wouldn't," he murmured. "And I'm the one who's sorry. For frightening you. You're forgiven." For a long moment, they remained locked in that embrace, Ariana clad only in her underwear, Blaze holding her as if she were made of spun glass. A silent understanding passed between them, a bond forged in his grief. And then the reality of the situation crashed over Ariana, the sheerness of her clothing, the hard press of his body against hers. She saw his eyes open again, the blue darkening to a stormy cobalt, as his gaze drifted over her features, not with lust, but with something far more intense. It was a look of pure awareness, and it sent a flush of heat across her skin. "I should—" Blaze's voice was rough as he cleared his throat and took a step back. His eyes did a quick, involuntary sweep of her body before flicking toward the door. "I should probably let you get dressed." "Right," Ariana managed to say, her own voice thin and lacking air. "Dressed? Yes, a very good idea." Yet they were both frozen in place, paralyzed by the crackling energy that now filled the space between them. A dog's bark from somewhere outside shattered the fragile moment. Without another word, Blas turned and left, shutting the door behind him with a quiet, deliberate click. Ariana was left standing in the sudden silence, her heart hammering against her ribs, her skin alive with the ghost of his touch. In that one moment, the entire landscape of their relationship had shifted. There was no returning to what they were before. Blaze just opened up his entire past to Ariana, and that tension is something else. If you're feeling that chemistry, drop a comment and make sure you subscribe, because this story is about to explode. And smash that like button if you think Blaze is finally admitting to himself that he is falling hard for this woman. You are not going to want to miss what comes next. Sunlight poured through the cottage windows the next morning, finding Ariana humming softly as she stirred a pot of wild berry compote on the stove. The first time she'd offered to cook, Blaze had just stared at her in silence for a full 10 seconds. It was a reaction she was used to. People took one look at her and made a whole list of assumptions, number one being that she couldn't light a match, let alone a cooking fire. But they didn't know her grandmother, who had drilled the absolute fundamentals of survival into her head. Starting with how to cook a decent meal for yourself. 3 weeks. It had been 3 weeks since she'd arrived at his doorstep, and Ariana Shrewdman, no Ariana Moss, had felt more contentment than in all her privileged life. The irony was staggering. She was on the run from hired killers, living under an assumed name in a rustic cabin with a man whose entire furniture collection consisted of a single chair and who seemed to believe salt and pepper were exotic spices. And yet she was happy. Because of him. Just then, Blaze walked in, a heavy load of firewood cradled in his arms. The black tank top he wore was plastered to his sculpted torso. Even in the crisp mountain air, a fine sheen of sweat highlighted the powerful lines of his arms and shoulders. "You're awake," he observed, his voice a low rumble, as he began stacking the logs with military precision. "I wanted to get breakfast ready before you went on your run." Ariana spooned the warm berry compote onto a thick slice of bread she'd baked the day before. "Somebody's got to make sure you consume something other than raw vegetables, you rabbit." For the record, rabbits have a more varied diet than that. They also eat their own. "It was a joke, Blaze," she cut in. "A joke doesn't have to be scientifically accurate." In mock frustration, Ariana tossed a loose berry at his head. Without even glancing up, his hand shot out and snatched it from the air. He popped it into his mouth, a single eyebrow arching in her direction. "Don't waste food," he deadpanned. "That was ridiculously impressive, and you know it." A faint twitch at the corner of his lips was her only reward, the ghost of a smile. And that was it. For the last 3 weeks, Ariana had made it her sole purpose to chip away at that stone-cold facade. And piece by piece, ever so slowly, she was breaking through. The smiles were more frequent now, still small, fleeting things that you'd miss if you blinked, but they were real. He was opening up, sharing fragments of his world stories of the mountains, survival tricks, thoughts on books he'd read. He'd even worn one of the shirts she'd bought him, a deep blue that mirrored the color of his eyes, though only once. Ariana had celebrated the event with so much enthusiasm that Blaze had immediately retreated back into his customary black tank tops. His expression was shuttered once more, but she'd seen the shadow of amusement, and she never missed the way his gaze would linger on her. This wasn't her imagination. She would catch him staring, his focus intense whenever he thought she wasn't aware. It happened during their sparring sessions, the moment she executed a move perfectly. It happened when she was making dinner, humming wildly off-key, or reading by the fire. Tucked away in a corner with one of his worn-out books, she'd feel his eyes on her, and they would darken with an emotion that made her stomach do a slow, nervous flip. He never acted on it, though. Blaze was the very picture of discipline. They ate their breakfast in a comfortable quiet before heading outside for their daily regimen. "Today we're focusing on grappling," Blaze announced. "Close quarters combat. If an opponent gets past your guard, you need to know how to dominate them when there's no distance left." "Sounds intimate," Ariana said, stretching her arms slowly over her head. Blaze's eyes tracked the fluid movement, his gaze snagging on the pale strip of skin revealed as her shirt rode up. He looked away abruptly, his jaw tight. Ariana fought to suppress a triumphant smile. She was getting under his skin. "This kind of work requires trust." Blaze said, his tone all business again. "I'm going to come at you. You're going to use a technique, not brute force, to redirect my own momentum." "Understand?" "Understood, Commander." Fire flashed in Blaze's eyes. "Don't call me that." "Why not? It's what you were, weren't you, a commander?" "That was another life." "Doesn't make it any less real." Blaze studied her for a long, heavy moment, his expression completely unreadable. And then he moved. 1 second he was standing 3 feet away. The next he had erased the distance between them and had her locked in a hold. It wasn't tight enough to cause pain, but it was firm enough that only pure technique would grant her freedom. "What's your move?" Blaze asked, his voice a low vibration right next to her ear. Ariana's breath caught in her throat. She felt the solid wall of his chest against her back, the sheer heat of his body, the controlled power humming in his arms. "Focus, Ariana." She dropped her weight low. Twisting against his grip at its weakest point, just as he'd taught her, she slipped free. "Good." Blae said, a note of approval coloring his voice again. They ran through the same drill over and over. Each time, Blaze changed his attack, forcing Ariana to adapt and react. By the 20th repetition, her breath was coming in ragged gasps, her entire body hyper-aware of every point of contact between them. "Break," Blaze ordered, stepping back. Ariana bent over, bracing her hands on her knees to catch her breath. "Are you trying to kill me?" "I'm trying to prepare you." "For what? Professional wrestling?" "For reality. If someone gets their hands on you, they aren't going to be gentle. You have to be able to react on instinct." Ariana straightened up, pushing a sweaty strand of hair from her face. "I know and I appreciate it. I really do." She stepped closer, looking up into his face. "You're a good teacher, Blaze. Patient, thorough. You probably saved a lot of lives with that kind of leadership." A spasm of pain crossed Blaze's features. "I lost more than I saved." "That is not true." 23 people, Ariana. I was responsible for 23 soldiers, including my baby brother. I failed them all." "You didn't fail them," Ariana said with fierce certainty. "The system failed them. The politicians who cut your funding failed them. You fought for 18 hours with no supplies. You survived because you're strong and you are skilled and you refuse to give up. That isn't failure, that's heroism." Blaze's blue eyes searched hers as if looking for a lifeline. "You really believe that?" "I know it." For a long moment, the air between them grew thick and heavy with unspoken tension. Blaze's gaze dropped to her lips, then flickered back to her eyes. Ariana's heart was hammering against her ribs. "Kiss me," she pleaded silently. "Please just kiss me." But Blaze took a sharp step back, shattering the moment. "We should continue training," he said, his voice a little rough around the edges. "Right," Ariana replied, trying to slow her racing pulse. "Training, let's do that." But something had shifted between them, a change they both could feel. That afternoon, while Blaze was working in the garden, Ariana decided the cottage needed some rearranging. "What are you doing?" Blaze asked, walking inside to find her moving his single armchair. "Making the space more functional." "You need a second chair. We can't keep sitting on the floor like a couple of campers." "I like the floor." "You like punishing yourself. There's a difference." Ariana positioned the chair opposite a second seating area she had created with a log she dragged in and covered with blankets. "There. Now we can sit across from each other like civilized people." Blaze looked at her handiwork and then at her. "You know you're only here temporarily, right? You're going to leave the moment your father sorts out his situation." The reminder stung far more than Ariana wanted to admit. "I know," she said quietly, "but while I'm here, we might as well be comfortable." Blaze said nothing, but later that evening he sat in the armchair across from her log seat without a single word of complaint. It was progress. And over the next week, their shared routine deepened into something more. Their days settled into a quiet, unspoken rhythm. Blaze would handle repairs on the property each morning, while Ariana lost herself in books or the kitchen. Nightfall always brought them to the hearth where they'd either trade quiet stories or let the crackling flames fill the comfortable silence. She slowly pieced together his life, learning he occasionally sold what he foraged from the woods if he needed pocket money. This despite a substantial government settlement in his bank account, a fund he refused to touch, poisoned by the belief that it was blood money. She also discovered his solace was in philosophy. His worn copies of Marcus Aurelius Seneca and Epictetus were filled with stoic ideals on duty discipline and the bitter pill of accepting what is beyond your control. "Is that how you manage?" Ariana asked softly one night, watching the firelight flicker across the hard lines of his face. "By trying to accept it all, I'm attempting to," Blaze conceded, his voice a low rumble. "That doesn't mean I'm anywhere close to succeeding." "But what if acceptance isn't the answer?" she challenged. "Maybe you're supposed to feel the rage to grieve. Maybe you're supposed to be human instead of some perfect, unfeeling soldier. Anger doesn't change what's done." "No," she agreed, "but it's honest. And sometimes honesty matters more than control." He looked at her, then truly saw her, and for a fleeting moment, Ariana watched a crack form in his ironclad emotional armor. "You're dangerous," he breathed out. "Why?" "Because you make me want things I have no right to ask for anymore." Her breath hitched in her throat. "Like what?" But he was already rising, extinguishing the moment. "It's late. You need your sleep." With a curt, "Good night, Ariana," he stepped out into the darkness, and soon she heard the sharp, violent rhythm of him splitting firewood, battling back whatever she'd managed to stir inside him. She felt a thrill of victory. She was getting through to him, and she couldn't wait to see those walls come crashing down for good. The next morning, Ariana awoke to an empty cabin. A note left on the table simply said he was checking his trap lines and would return by noon. Ariana used the solitude to place a covert call to her father, assuring him of her safety. Afterwards, she let her curiosity guide her through the cottage, not snooping, but simply absorbing the details of the man who lived there. And that's when she stumbled upon a secret that would poison everything. Tucked away in a drawer, she found his military medals, each a testament to his bravery and sacrifice. Beneath them were photographs Blaze and another boy, Garrison, as kids with gap-toothed grins. A younger Blaze proud in his dress uniform, his eyes not yet haunted by the things they'd seen. There was a photo of his entire platoon, a sea of bright, hopeful faces staring into a future that most of them would never reach. And then she found a journal. A wave of guilt washed over her. She knew reading it was an unforgivable violation, but the need to understand him was stronger. The entries were sparse, detached, but one from 3 years ago stopped her heart. I don't know why I was the one to walk away when they all died. Garrison was younger, smarter. He had everything ahead of him. Yet the politicians who signed the order to cut our supply line, Senator Carrington, Senator Low Representative Shrewdman, every last one of them is still in power, still making choices that get men killed. They get promotions and praise, while my brother is rotting in the ground. There is no justice in this world. There's only survival, and I'm not sure it's worth it. The journal slipped from her numb fingers. Representative Shrewdman, her father. The man who raised her was one of the men who'd signed the death warrant for Blaze's platoon. Her father's signature had led to the deaths of Garrison and 23 other soldiers. The air in the room felt thin, impossible to breathe. All this time, she'd been terrified he'd despise her for being a politician's daughter. The truth was infinitely more catastrophic. Her father wasn't just some politician Blaze would dislike on principle. Her father was the architect of the single greatest tragedy in Blaze's life. Ariana fled to the bathroom and was violently sick. When Blaze returned at noon, he found her sitting on the porch steps, her face ashen and drawn. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice laced with immediate concern. "Fine." Ariana lied, the word tasting like poison. "Just felt a bit sick this morning." His hand went to her forehead, checking for a fever. "You don't feel warm." His gentleness was an agony that made her want to weep. "I'm okay, promise." But she was fractured beyond repair. She was falling desperately in love with a man whose life her own father had utterly destroyed, and she was trapped in the wreckage. Over the next few days, Ariana retreated into herself, becoming quiet and withdrawn. Blaze noticed. "You've been distant," he commented one evening as they cooked side by side. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Ariana snapped, chopping vegetables with a brutal force. "Ariana." She glanced up and met his searching blue-eyed gaze. "If something's on your mind, you can tell me," Blaze said, his voice soft. The crushing irony of it all nearly made her laugh out loud. He was offering her honesty, a safe place to land, while she was drowning in the depth of her lies. "I'm fine," she insisted. "Just thinking about going home, about my father and everything." It wasn't a complete lie, just a carefully edited version of the truth. "When was the last time you spoke with him?" Blaze asked casually. Ariana froze solid. She hadn't dared to even turn her phone on since finding the journal. "It's been a while," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Maybe you should check in, make sure he's making progress." Maybe. But Ariana had no intention of calling her father. The longer she could stay hidden away in this impossible bubble with Blaze, the longer she could pretend that the devastating reality waiting to crash down on them didn't exist. Sleep was a stranger to her that night. Ariana just lay there, eyes fixed on the ceiling, listening to the sound of Blae pacing his own restlessness, a mirror of hers. She whispered his name into the darkness. "Blae, are you still awake?" A beat of silence, then a low yes. "Can I ask you something?" Another pause stretched between them before he finally answered, "Go on." "Do you ever just wish you could rewind time? Do things over, choose a different path?" His reply was barely a murmur. "Every single day. But wishes don't rewrite history." "But what if," Ariana hesitated, testing the words, "what if you could find it in you to forgive them, the ones who made the call, the bureaucrats who slashed the budget? Do you think that would bring you any peace?" Blaze's response was a whip crack in the quiet room, sharp and immediate. "Never. Some things are beyond forgiveness. They put a price on human lives to balance a spreadsheet. They knew men would die because of it, and they signed off anyway. Men like that don't get a basin." A cold weight settled in Ariana's stomach. But what if they weren't aware? She pushed a little harder. What if it wasn't their call? If they were just cogs in a machine completely blind to what their actions would cause. Not knowing isn't an excuse, Blae countered. They had a duty, and they betrayed it. Period. The absolute conviction in his tone was like a door slamming shut, and a devastating realization hit Ariana with the force of a physical blow. The moment he learned her true identity, that same unforgiving judgment would be turned on her. There would be no pardon. Ever. She buried her face in the pillow, letting the silent tears come until exhaustion finally claimed her. But she woke the next morning with a new steely resolve. She figured she had about a week tops before her father's network closed in on her, and the election was just 6 days away. Once the polls closed, her father's retrieval team would be dispatched to bring her home. That gave her exactly 6 days. 6 days to make him love her. 6 days to build something so real, so powerful, that it might just survive the revelation of who she was. The odds were impossible, but it was the only place she had left. I want you to teach me something else today, Ariana announced during their session. Something more advanced. Blae arched a skeptical eyebrow at her. You believe you're prepared for that level. I'm prepared for anything you're willing to show me. The double meaning in her words ignited a spark of heat deep in his gaze. He cleared his throat at the moment broken. All right, we'll cover pressure points. How to use small, precise strikes to disable a much larger threat. Using himself as a model, he pointed out the critical vulnerabilities, the soft tissue of the neck, the points beneath the arms, the hollow behind the knee. Then he took her hands, placing them on his own body so she could feel the exact spots. Ariana fought to concentrate on the technique, but her mind was consumed by the solid warmth of him beneath her touch. She felt the slight catch in his breath as her fingers brushed his neck and saw his eyes darken with an unnerving intensity. Here, Blae rasped, his voice huskier than before. He moved her hand to a spot just beneath his earlobe. A sharp jab right here will throw them off balance. It'll buy you the time you need to get away. And what if getting away is the last thing I want, she murmured. His grip on her hand became a vice. Ariana, what if I want to stay exactly where I am? You don't understand what you're asking for. Oh, I think I do. She closed the remaining space between them, her gaze locked on his. I know precisely what I'm saying. We can't do this, Blae insisted, though he didn't retreat an inch. You have a life to get back to. Us, it has an expiration date. Then let's make the time we have matter. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. She could practically see the battle raging inside him. Duty against desire. In the end, his training won out. He took a deliberate step back, letting go of her hand. Let's take 5. A scream of pure frustration clawed at Ariana's throat, but she swallowed it down and simply nodded. Fine. That afternoon, she switched tactics. She discovered him working outside, methodically replacing a warped plank on the side of the cottage. Hey there, she purred, draping herself casually against the wall. Question for you. You'll ask regardless. Do you think I'm beautiful? The hammer in Blae's hand faltered, missing its mark and nearly smashing his thumb. He corrected his grip instantly, but not before she caught the flash of utter shock on his face. Excuse me, he managed to get out. Am I beautiful? She repeated, pushing away from the wall and closing the distance between them with a deliberate swaying gait. She saw his eyes betray him, dropping to follow the motion of her hips before snapping back to her face. Well, she prompted, stepping even nearer. So what's the verdict? Am I? Yes. He bit out the word, sounding more like a pained groan. Yes, you're... He left the thought hanging in the air, spinning back to his task and clutching the hammer as if it were a lifeline. But Ariana had gotten her answer. The desire was there, simmering just below the surface. He was just too iron-willed to give in to it. So over the following days, she escalated her efforts. She chose her most form-fitting outfits. During their training, her touches became more frequent. Touches that weren't required, that lasted a fraction of a second too long. When she'd catch his gaze on her, she'd offer a slow, deliberate smile that said she knew exactly what he was thinking. Blae's composure was clearly fraying at the edges. A muscle in his jaw was permanently tight. His training sessions grew longer, almost brutal in their intensity. He invented excuses to get out of the house whenever the air between them grew too charged. And yet he began to touch her more often as well. Subtle things, the brief pressure of his hand on the small of her back as he moved past. His hands correcting her posture during a drill, but staying in place just a moment too long, or the gentle sweep of his fingers as he pushed a stray strand of hair from her eyes. The space between them had become a tangible thing. a gravity pulling them into an orbit they couldn't escape. One night as the fire crackled and spit, an idea took root in Ariana's mind. All day she had been working with grass and twine, her fingers practicing the intricate knots Blae had shown her. But this was different. She had crafted a simple ring, a band of woven twine and dried grass that was surprisingly strong. "Give me your hand," Ariana whispered. Blae glanced up from his book, a question in his eyes. "Why by his side? Just trust me." He slowly offered his right hand, and when Ariana took it, her own was completely engulfed by his. She gently slid the woven ring onto his finger. It settled perfectly. "What's this for?" Blae asked, his gaze fixed on the simple object. "It's a reminder," she said softly, "that you're not out here by yourself, that someone cares." Blae's piercing blue eyes locked with hers, and the raw emotions swirling in them stole her breath. "Ariana, I can't accept this. You don't have to say a word. Just wear it, please." For a long, silent moment, Blae just stared at the ring on his hand. Finally, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. Okay. He never took it off. That night, Ariana lay awake, the sound of Blae's steady breathing from the next room a painful comfort. 4 days left. 4 days until the election results came in, and this fragile, perfect world they'd built would shatter. Reality was coming, and it was going to tear them apart. But for now, for these last precious days, she would allow herself to love him. She would love him even if he never knew the full truth, and even if learning it made him hate her very existence. On the morning of the election, a cold dread settled deep in Ariana's bones. Somewhere far from the sanctuary of this mountain, votes were being cast, sealing her father's political fate. And any moment now, today, tomorrow, his men would be coming for her. "You're lost in thought again," Blae noted as they ate lunch. "I'm thinking about how desperately I love you, how telling you the truth will shatter everything we have. How I am the daughter of the man you despise more than anyone on this earth. I'm thinking about how much I'm going to miss this," Ariana said instead. "When I have to go." Blae put his fork down, his movements sharp. "You don't have to go yet. My father's business will be settled soon, for better or worse. And if it's not, I'll figure something out. I always land on my feet." Blae watched her, his expression unreadable. "Stay." The word hung in the air, and Ariana's heart seized. "What?" "Stay," Blae repeated, his voice low and intense. "Not for a little while. Stay with me." "Blae, I can't." "Why not?" He leaned in, his entire body radiating a fierce intensity. "You said it yourself, you don't want to go back to that life. You're happy here. I can see it in your eyes, and He hesitated, the words catching in his throat. "I haven't been this happy in 3 years." Tears burned the back of Ariana's eyes. "You have no idea what you're asking of me. I'm just asking you to stay. That's it. No strings, no expectations. Just be here. There are things about me you don't know." Ariana whispered, her voice trembling. "Things that would change everything." "I don't care." "You would. Believe me, you would care." Blae reached across the table and captured her hand in his. "Then tell me," he urged. "Whatever it is, just tell me." Ariana's mouth opened, the confession poised on the tip of her tongue. "My name isn't real. I am Ariana Shrewdman. My father is Senator Dwight Shrewdman, the man who gutted the funding for your platoon. The man responsible for your brother's death. I've been lying to you from the moment we met." Before the first word could escape, a low rumble vibrated through the floorboards. Engines. The distinct heavy sound of multiple vehicles climbing the mountain road. Blae was on his feet in a flash, his body instantly coiled. "Stay put," he commanded, his voice turning to steel. He moved to the window. "Military." "Blae, wait." He strode to the safe, pulled out his sidearm, and moved toward the door. Ariana's pulse hammered against her ribs. This was it. Her father's men had found her. The bubble had just burst. 3 menacing black SUVs rolled into the clearing. The doors flew open, and men in full tactical gear poured out, securing the area with cold-practiced efficiency. The back door of the main SUV swung wide. A man stepped onto the gravel, flanked by a security detail. Blaze froze, every muscle in his body turning to stone. Ariana watched the realization crash over him. It wasn't just recognition. It was a physical impact, a blow that seemed to steal the air from his lungs. She saw the blood vanish from his face, instantly replaced by a wave of pure, terrifying fury. "No," Blaze breathed out, a desperate whisper that grew into a choked cry. "No, no." Because the man approaching the cabin, a jarring figure in a $1,000 suit against the wild mountain scenery, was a face Blaze had seared into his memory. It was the face that stalked him in his sleep. Senator Dwight Shrewdman, one of the four men whose signatures had gutted his platoon's funding. You, Blae breathed in his voice a tremor of pure unadulterated rage. He brought his weapon up, leveling it squarely at the senator's chest. Dad, Senator Shrewdman froze his security detail, snapping their own weapons up in a deafening series of clicks. I'm afraid you have me at a disadvantage, the senator said, his politician's smile stretched thin. Forward operating base, Phoenix. Blae bit out each word a shard of ice. Syria, 3 years ago. Budget Committee Vote 447B. You and 3 of your colleagues voted to slash our supply funding. Do you remember that vote, Senator? The senator's face went ashen. I've cast votes on hundreds of budgetary items. That man, Blaze's voice trembled, but his aim never wavered, is responsible for the deaths of 23 American soldiers. Because of him, I was clawing through rubble with my bare hands to find what was left of my brother, all while D.C. suits argued over line items. Ariana stumbled out onto the porch, tears already blinding her. Blaze, she pleaded. He turned and the look in his eyes was utterly chilling, a dead cold emptiness that terrified her more than his anger. Shrewdman, he said, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. His ice blue eyes darted from the approaching senator back to her. That's your last name, isn't it? Not Moss, it's Shrewdman. Blaze, please, you have to let me explain. You're his daughter. The accusation wasn't angry anymore. It was worse. It was a flat, dead certainty. You are Senator Dwight Shrewdman's daughter. Yes, Ariana whispered, the sound barely audible. Blaze's rifle lowered, not as a choice, but as if the strength had just evaporated from his arms. The man who murdered my brother. Blaze breathed, his voice raw. The face that haunts every single one of my nightmares. For 3 years, he's been the man I've wanted to. The sentence died on his lips, the dark implication hanging between them. That man is your father. I didn't know, Ariana cried out, stepping towards him. Not at first. I didn't know what he did, I swear. Until when? Blaze's voice cut through her, please, sharp and cold as ice. Tell me, when did you know? The silence that followed was a confession. You knew, Blaze whispered, the pieces clicking into place with sickening finality. That's why you've been walking around here like a ghost for the last week. You found out what your father did to me. I was just trying to find the right time and the right words. The right way, eh? A raw, broken laugh escaped Blaze's lips. It was a terrible sound. There is no right way to admit it. You've been living a lie since the second I laid eyes on you. Ariana, Senator Shrewdman called out, his voice laced with confusion. Honey, what's all this about? Do you know him? Blaze didn't even glance at the senator. His entire world was fixed on Ariana's face. Do you know this man? He repeated the words, a venomous parody of the senator's concern. Answer your father, Ariana, or should I say Ariana Moss? Because that's the name you gave me, isn't it? Senator Shrewdman's voice grew hard. You lied about who you are. Ariana, what is the meaning of this? I lied about all of it, Ariana confessed, her voice fracturing. I told him my last name was Moss. I told him you were in trouble with dangerous people. I lied because... She looked at Blaze, her expression pleading, her heart shattering into a million pieces. Because you told me you hated people with money, especially people in politics. I knew if you knew who I really was, you'd send me away. Damn right I would have. His voice finally broke, rising into a shout filled with the jagged edges of betrayal. You came into my home. You wormed your way into my life. You let me teach you how to survive. Let me train with you. You let me care about you, damn it, and every second of it was a complete fraud. The entire time you were the child of the man who represents everything I despise in this world. But what I felt wasn't a lie, Ariana pleaded desperately. Everything I felt for you, Blaze, us, that was the only thing that was real. And how the hell am I supposed to believe that? His voice cracked on the last word. You've been lying to my face for a month. A month you've lived under my roof, eaten my food, slept in my house. You sat there looking me in the eye and asked me about forgiveness. You asked me if I could ever let go of what those politicians did. And the whole time, the whole goddamn time, you knew your own father was one of the men who destroyed my life. At that, Senator Shrewdman advanced, his bodyguards moving with him. Gentlemen, I think there's been a slight misunderstanding. The senator interjected, his voice, the smooth, placating tone of a career politician. Ariana obviously had no idea about your personal grievances. And let me be perfectly clear. Bakın, başkanlığa suspend that if my vote was part of any budget resolution that unfortunately affected military operations, I was merely acting in accordance with the directives from my party's leadership. Blaze's head snapped toward the senator, his face contorted with a rage so profound it was almost beautiful in its terror. Following guidance, he repeated the words laced with poison. That's what you hide behind. You signed off on cutting funds knowing full well it would leave soldiers in the field completely exposed. And your excuse for all of it is that you were just following orders. Young man, I realize you're upset. Upset. Blaze's laugh was a harsh scraping sound utterly devoid of humor. My brother was 22 years old. He had a fiancée waiting for him. He was going to be a history teacher. He followed me into the service because he was my little brother and he looked up to me. Because I was the one who told him serving this country was a noble cause. His voice shattered, and it killed him, inch by inch. He bled out for 3 hours, Senator. 3, because your budget cuts meant we didn't have the supplies to stop it. For 3 hours, all I could do was listen to him call my name. Bashimna begging me to make it stop. And I couldn't do a damn thing, because you and your committee decided that balancing a spreadsheet was more important than a soldier's life. The color drained from the senator's face, leaving it a pasty gray. I am profoundly sorry for your loss. Truly. But you must understand those decisions came from a level far above me. At the time, I was a junior representative, simply following the established party line. Stop. Blawan's voice dropped to a low, dangerous tremor. Don't you even try to downplay your part in this. You had a say. You cast your vote. You put a price on human lives. So you better own that. Let's all just take a breath, Senator Shrewdman interjected, his political instincts taking over. This is obviously a very charged moment for everyone. You want to know the sickest part of it all? Blae one cut him off, his eyes locking back onto Ariana. I was actually starting to believe again. Starting to think that maybe I could have a real life. That life could be more than just waking up and breathing. He brushed his thumb over the woven ring on his finger. You gave me that. You made me hope. Blaze, Ariana's voice shattered, and the whole damn thing was a lie. Blah one shot back. Every last bit of it. Was any of it genuine? Your name, the stories you told, all of it? Or was I just some broken soldier you could piece back together to feel like a hero? That is so unfair. Fair, the word tore from his throat, dripping with contempt. You want to lecture me on what's fair? My brother, my men, they will never get to see their wedding day, never hold their own children, never know what it's like to grow old. And it's because your father, he jabbed a finger at Senator Shrewdman, decided his political ambitions were worth more than their lives. And you dare to speak to me about fairness? A raw sob broke from Ariana, her words lost in a torrent of tears. Ari, baby, come on, her father cooed, approaching her as if she were a frightened animal. We're going home. This man is clearly unhinged. I am not unhinged, Blae countered, his voice like ice. I am shattered. There's a profound difference. The senator stepped onto the porch, placing himself like a barricade between Ariana and Blae. I insist on compensating to you for ensuring my daughter's safety, Senator Shrewdman offered, producing his leather wallet. Just name your price. Blae eyed the wallet as if it were a venomous snake. Go to hell, Blae spat. I want nothing from you. I want you gone from my mountain. Blae, I'm begging you, Ariana pleaded. Please just give me 1 minute to explain. I'm finished listening to you, Blae stated, the warmth in his blue eyes extinguished, leaving only a hollow void. I'm finished believing any lie that comes from your mouth. You deceived me from the moment we met. You knew what your father was responsible for, and you still let me fall completely in love with you. You let me give you my heart. You let me hope that maybe... His voice cracked with the weight of his broken hope. It's over. Just leave. I love you, Ariana confessed, the words ripping out of her chest. I know you'll never believe me, and I don't expect you to ever forgive me, but I do love you. What we had was real. It was always real. Blae flinched as if her words had physically struck him. Don't, he whispered, his voice raw. You don't get to use that word with me, not after what you've done. Senator Shrewdman gently but firmly took Ariana's arm. Come along, sweetheart. We're going home. Oh, Ariana choked out, pulling her arm away. Dad, the funding you cut. Men died because of that choice. His brother is dead because of you. Ariana, this is hardly the time for this. Then when is the right time? Ariana spun to face her father, her sorrow instantly crystallizing into pure rage. When exactly were you going to mention that you were responsible for killing American heroes? I was following a directive from the party's leadership, the senator replied, his voice hardening into a defensive wall. The order to cut that funding came from much higher up. I merely voted as I was instructed. And you think that makes it acceptable? Ariana stared at her father as if seeing the man behind the politician for the very first time. So you just followed orders, which means you're not responsible for the consequences. That is how our government functions. No, Ariana, that is how politics functions. Sometimes we are forced to make extremely difficult decisions. Don't say it, Ariana warned, her voice trembling. I swear, don't you dare say it was for the greater good. For the greater good of our country, Senator Shrewdman concluded, completely ignoring her desperate plea. Indeed, individual sacrifices are sometimes required for the broader national interest. They weren't sacrifices, Ariana screamed. They were people. They were living, breathing men with families and futures, and you threw them away because a party official told you to cast a vote. Ariana Louise Shrewdman, that is more than enough, the senator's voice turned to steel. You've clearly suffered a traumatic ordeal, and you are not thinking rationally. We are leaving this instant. I'm not going anywhere with you. Oh, yes, you are. You are my daughter, and you are coming home with me. Home, Ariana let out a bitter, hollow laugh. Home to what exactly? To your mansion paid for with blood money. To the political career you built on the bodies of good men. Ariana, I barely recognize you anymore. Senator Shrewdman's expression became an unreadable mask. Very well. We can have this discussion once you've regained your composure, but we are departing from this mountain today. He motioned to his security detail, and two men moved to flank her, ready to escort her to the vehicle. Her gaze flew to Blae, searching his face one last time. He stood motionless on the porch, the woven band still on his finger, his blue eyes utterly vacant, as if she had personally extinguished the very soul within him. I'm so sorry, Ariana whispered, for everything. I am so sorry. Blae turned his back on her and retreated into his cottage. He never looked back. The sharp slam of the door echoed like a final judgment. The security team gently guided Ariana toward the SUV. She moved on autopilot, her body functioning even as her heart was shattering into a million pieces. As the vehicle pulled away, she pressed her face against the window, watching the cottage vanish into the dense woods. The one place she had ever felt truly happy, with the one man she had ever truly loved, now lost to her in the most cruel and permanent way. She knew with a soul-crushing certainty that she had just destroyed the only thing that had ever mattered. And just like that, Ariana lost everything, and honestly, I am not okay with it. If you are crying right now, comment, "My heart is broken," and make sure you subscribe because the next installment will test whether love can truly conquer a betrayal of this magnitude. Hit that like button if you believe that deep down somewhere in his soul, Blae is still in love with her. This story is about to get intense, and you need to see how it all unfolds. The drive back to Seattle was shrouded in a heavy silence. Ariana sat in the rear of the SUV, watching the mountains recede in the distance, a steady stream of tears flowing down her face. Senator Shrewdman sat beside her, reaching for her hand every so often in a hollow gesture of comfort. Each time she pulled away as if his touch burned her skin. You'll feel worlds better once you're home, he finally offered. A hot shower, some decent food, your own bed. This entire nightmare will just melt away. Ariana turned her head, her eyes drilling into her father's, truly seeing him. This was the man who had sculpted her, who had buried her in every luxury imaginable, who had trained her to be tough, sharp, and to never ever surrender. And this was the man whose vote to slash funding had led to the deaths of 23 soldiers, a fact that didn't seem to cost him a moment's sleep. It wasn't a nightmare, Ariana said, her voice dangerously low. It was the only real month of my life. A weary sigh escaped Senator Shrewdman. Ariana, and you took it from me. You and your political maneuvering and your hollow sense of duty. You destroyed everything. I saved you from making the biggest mistake of your life, the senator declared, his voice firm. That man is broken, unstable, hiding in the woods like a recluse. He was completely wrong for you. He was the only thing in my life that wasn't a lie. He was a fairy tale, a fleeting escape from the world you actually live in. Now you are back where you are meant to be. Ariana turned to face the window again, fresh tears burning her eyes because her father was right about that one terrible thing. She was back in the real world, and this world felt brittle, empty, and fundamentally wrong. The Shrewdman estate, nestled in Seattle's exclusive Madison Park, was just as she'd left it a month ago. monstrous, immaculate, and utterly without a soul. As Ariana stepped through the massive front doors, a profound sense of revulsion churned in her stomach. The polished marble floors alone were likely worth more than most people earn in a decade. The dripping crystal chandeliers, the museum-quality art, the imported designer furniture. It all felt tainted now, like it had been paid for with blood. Every last piece of it was meaningless. "Why don't you head upstairs and rest, my dear?" Senator Shrewdman suggested. "I'll have Maria fix your favorite dinner." "I'm not hungry." Her voice was monotone. "I need to be alone." Ariana ascended the sweeping staircase to her bedroom, a place that had once been her sanctuary but now felt like a beautifully appointed cell. She showered on autopilot, the water sluicing away the dirt of the mountains, the scent of pine and wild earth, the very last physical remnants of Blaze. When she saw her own reflection, she saw a stranger. Her eyes were raw and swollen from crying. Her face had grown leaner, thinned by Blaze's simple, honest meals. Her once perfect nails were chipped and broken, casualties of training and cooking and living an actual life, not a meticulously curated performance. She looked like someone else. She felt like someone else. She was someone else, and she knew she could never go back to being that girl from before. Later that night, a soft knock came at her door. "Come in," Ariana called out, her voice lifeless. He entered with a tray bearing a teapot and a small plate. "Maria brewed your favorite lavender tea, and she made those lemon shortbread cookies you've always loved." Ariana glanced at this tray and felt a deep, hollow emptiness. A month ago, this small gesture would have felt like a comfort. Now her mind was filled with the taste of Blaze's simple warm bread with fresh honey, the tart wild berry jam she'd made with her own hands, the hearty venison stew he had devoured with a gratitude that made her heart ache. "Thanks, Daddy," she said mechanically, taking the cup. Senator Shrewdman settled on the edge of her bed. "I know you're furious with me, but in time you'll understand. Everything I do it for you, to give you the best life imaginable. By voting to abandon soldiers to their fate." The senator's jaw clenched. "That's not fair, Ariana. You're taking a complex political reality and reducing it to a soundbite." "No, for the first time ever, I am seeing it with perfect clarity." Ariana set her tea down with a steady hand. "You had a choice. You could have voted no on the funding cuts. You could have stood against your party's leadership. You could have chosen to protect those soldiers instead of playing it safe. But you didn't. It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple." Ariana's voice rose, cracking with emotion. "You had a choice between what was right and what was politically convenient. And you chose politics. You chose your damn career over their lives. And if I had voted against my party, I would have lost my position." Senator Shrewdman retorted, his own voice hardening. "I would have lost all my influence and my ability to do any good at all. Sometimes you have to compromise to remain in the fight." "And was it worth it?" Ariana demanded. "Is your seat worth Garrison's life? Is it worth the lives of 22 other soldiers?" "I didn't know that would happen." "You knew." She got to her feet, her body trembling with a white-hot rage. "You knew that cutting their supply lines would put them in grave danger. You knew damn well, and you cast your vote anyway. And you're standing here trying to rationalize it because admitting the truth means admitting that you have blood on your hands." Senator Shrewdman stood up to face her, his complexion darkening with anger. "That is quite enough, Ariana. You're being emotional, and you are not thinking rationally." "I'm thinking rationally for the first time in my entire life," she shot back. "And what I see makes me physically sick." "Fine." The senator's voice became ice. "Be furious with me. Hate me if it makes you feel better, but you are forbidden from ever going back to that man. You will not throw your life away on some trauma-rattled soldier who lives in the forest like a wild animal. You are a shrewd man. You have a legacy to uphold. A legacy built on the graves of men like him." His hand slammed down on her dresser with a loud crack. "Enough! This conversation is over. You will stay here. You will remember your name and what it stands for. And you are going to get over this pathetic, ridiculous infatuation." He strode to the door, then stopped with his hand on the frame. "I've set up a meeting for you with Harry White for next week. The Whites basically run Silicon Valley. Their family owns half the tech firms out there. Harry just wrapped up his MBA at Harvard. He's the total package, handsome, rich, from a prominent family. And he's the absolute last person I want to be with. I have zero interest in meeting Harry White." "That's not a request. You're meeting him, you'll act with grace, and you will give the man a fair shot." His tone left no room for argument. "The arrangements are made," he stated, turning and shutting the door with a final click. The sound echoed as Ariana collapsed onto her bed, her gaze lost on the ceiling above. So this was it. Her existence reduced to a series of curated events, carefully selected suitors, endless political functions, and hollow charity galas. A performance playing the part of the flawless senator's daughter. It was the life she'd known before Blaze, a world that now felt utterly empty, a complete sham. Drawing her knees to her chest, she clutched a pillow like a lifeline and wept until the grief ran dry, leaving only a hollow ache behind. The following weeks were an exercise in pure agony. Ariana became a ghost in her own life, simply moving through the days without feeling. She dutifully appeared at her father's fundraisers and endured her dates with Harry White, who was just as handsome and affluent as promised and mind-numbingly dull. She forced smiles on the shopping trips with friends whose conversations never strayed beyond brand names and the latest gossip. It was all meaningless static. She made an effort to connect, to find some spark in the world that once captivated her, but every thought circled back to Blaze, to the fluid power of his movements during his sunrise training. She remembered the infrequent smiles that would completely alter his features and the profound patience he had while teaching her how to defend herself. She recalled the impossible gentleness in his touch, a stark contrast to the lethal capabilities she knew he possessed. And those piercing blue eyes, how they'd once held her as if she were priceless, only to later stare at her as if she were a traitor. That night, Harry White escorted her to a five-star restaurant. Every plate was a masterpiece of culinary art, flawlessly executed and stunningly arranged. Ariana consumed it all, like an automaton, the exquisite flavors turning to ash on her tongue. "You're a million miles away," Harry noted, swirling the wine in his glass. "Everything okay?" "Perfectly fine," Ariana lied through a forced smile. Just a little worn out, I guess. Your father told me you were gone for a bit. Something about a security issue." "You could say that." "Sounds terrifying." The words, "it was the most incredible month of my entire life," burned on her tongue. Instead, she just murmured, "It was complicated." Taking her cue, Harry began a long-winded monologue about his latest jaunt to Monaco. Ariana just nodded and smiled at all the right moments, but her spirit was far away, back on a remote mountain, in a simple cabin with a man in black who showed her that true living had nothing to do with opulence. As Harry's car pulled up to the estate later that night, he leaned in for a kiss. Instinctively, Ariana turned her face, his lips grazing her cheek instead. "I need to get inside," she said, already reaching for the door handle. "Can I see you again?" Harry asked, his confusion obvious at her sudden chill. "Thank you for the meal." "I don't think so, Harry." "But your father insisted." "My father insists on a great many things." Ariana cut in, swinging the car door open. "Good night." She strode toward the front door without a backward glance, letting his calls fade behind her. Just as she expected, Senator Shrewdman was standing in the grand foyer waiting. "So how did it go?" he demanded. "He seems pleasant enough, but I have no interest in him." A muscle in the senator's jaw twitched. "Ariana, it's time you put the past behind you." "Oh, I have Daddy. I'm just not moving in the direction you have mapped out for me." Without another word, she ascended the sweeping staircase, leaving him rooted in the foyer, his face a mask of pure frustration. If you believe it's time for Ariana to defy her father and claim her own future, choose yourself in the comments below. And if you're convinced Blaze is feeling this separation just as deeply, make sure you crush that subscribe button and hit like, because this redemption is going to be epic. 3 months after her return from the mountain, a profound realization settled over Ariana. This hollow existence was no longer sustainable. She had reached her breaking point. She could no longer fake an interest in a world that felt meaningless. She could no longer stand beside her father at political functions wearing a mask of contentment. She could not continue to perform the script of a life that was fundamentally a lie. A change was essential. She picked up her phone and dialed Destiny Marshall, her best friend from college, a designer who had spent years trying to convince her to go into business with her. "Does that offer to launch a fashion line together? Is it still on the table?" "Are you kidding me? I've been waiting 2 years for you to come to your senses." "I'm dead serious," Ariana confirmed. "But on one condition: we do it our way. No funding from my father. We build this from nothing, just us." "That's a monumental task," Destiny cautioned. "We'll need investment money, a workspace, sourcing, everything." "I have some savings put away," Ariana said. "And I am ready to pour everything I have into this. I mean it, Des. I'm ready to truly work." A beat of silence hung on the line before Destiny finally spoke. Okay, who is this, and what have you done with the real Ariana Shrewdman? For the first time in months, a genuine smile spread across Ariana's face. I'm the woman who finally understands what's truly important. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of creation as they forged their brand from scratch. Ariana traded her father's sprawling estate for a tiny apartment on Capitol Hill. The rent consumed over half of what she had saved, but the space was entirely her own. She taught herself how to live on a budget and prepare her own food. She started taking public transit instead of summoning a private car and threw herself into 16-hour days filled with stitching, sketching, and designing. She managed their online presence and tackled every single task required to keep their dream afloat. The work was brutal, the exhaustion was constant, and yet it was the most vibrantly alive she had felt since she'd been forced to leave the mountain. Predictably, Senator Shrewdman was incandescent with rage. "You are absolutely squandering your potential," he seethed, appearing at her doorstep uninvited one evening, hiding away in this closet, toiling away like some common worker. "You're a Croft, Ariana. You're above all this," he said, but her voice was steady as she replied, "No, I'm right where I need to be. This is about that soldier, isn't it? This whole charade is to punish me for what happened with him. This has nothing to do with him, Daddy. This is about finding out who I am when I'm not leaning on your name, your fortune, or your plans for my life." "You won't make it 6 months," the senator scoffed. "You've never done an honest day's work. You'll be back begging. And should that day come, don't expect a warm welcome. We'll just have to see, won't we?" But Ariana never came begging. She threw herself into her work with a ferocity she'd never known she possessed. She and Destiny launched a fashion line built on a revolutionary idea: edgy, affordable, one-of-a-kind clothes for actual people, not just abstract concepts for the runway elite. They named it Moss and Marshall, a quiet nod from Ariana to the alias she had worn on that mountain. It was the name that had somehow felt more true to her than her own. In the beginning, the business was a nightmare. There were months they barely scraped together the rent. There were nights fueled by instant noodles, haunted by the fear that they had gambled everything on a terrible mistake. But gradually things began to turn. A few fashion bloggers took notice. That led to interest from local shops, which was followed by a feature story in Seattle Magazine. By the close of their second year, Moss and Marshall was finally in the black. By the end of year 3, they were unlocking the doors to their very own boutique in Pike Place Market. Ariana had actually done it. She had built something tangible, something meaningful, something that was hers and hers alone. And yet a hollow ache remained inside her, a void shaped just like him, that no amount of success could ever hope to fill. 1,000 different times she resolved to drive back up that mountain. She would get as far as her car, the keys cold in her hand, fully intending to find him and plead for another chance. But her own fear always held her back. The fear of a door being slammed shut in her face. The fear that just the sight of her would reopen all his wounds. The crippling fear that too much time had gone by, that the damage was irreversible. And so she kept her distance, trying to piece together a life that felt whole even with him missing. 300 miles away, Blae was trying to do the exact same thing. That first month after she was gone was a special kind of hell. He retreated into pure survival mode, driving himself from sunrise to sunset, pushing his body to the brink of collapse just to quiet his mind, just so he wouldn't have to feel a thing. But the nights were a different story. In the crushing silence of the cottage, which now felt cavernous and empty, the memories would flood in. Ariana making breakfast, humming beautifully off-key. Ariana, her face a mask of fierce concentration as they trained together. Ariana, her laughter echoing as she poked fun at his stone-faced expressions until he finally broke into a smile. Ariana sliding that simple woven ring onto his finger. He must have tried to remove that ring 100 times, but his fingers would never obey the command. It was the only piece of her he had left. It didn't matter that it was born from a lie. It didn't matter that it was a constant reminder of how foolish he had been to trust her. Then 2 months after she vanished, Blae had a dream. It wasn't one of the usual nightmares, not of Syria, not of Marcus bleeding out in his arms. It was a dream of Ariana. They were back in the cottage and her laugh filled the small space. "Torturing yourself won't change a single thing that happened," she told him gently. "Garrison would have wanted you to find some peace." Blae woke with the unfamiliar sting of tears on his cheeks, and a profound realization dawned on him. Ariana had deceived him about who she was, about her family, and about her entire reason for being on his mountain. But everything else, every quiet talk, every shared glance, every piece of hard-won advice she'd offered, all of that had been undeniably true. She had reignited his will to live. She had made him see a future beyond just getting by. And while it was true that she had shattered his heart, she had also left him with an invaluable gift, hope. So what was he supposed to do with it? Let it wither and die because of the pain she'd caused? Was he going to let the ghosts of Garrison and his own betrayal write the final chapter of his life? Or was he going to honor the lessons she taught him and finally truly start to live? 3 months after Ariana's departure, Blae packed his bags. He couldn't bear to sell the cottage, not yet. But he came down from the mountain, found a small apartment for rent over a hardware store in town, and embarked on a path he never would have predicted for himself. He became a teacher. The local community center was looking for someone to lead a self-defense class. The wages were next to nothing, but Blae wasn't looking for money. He was searching for a reason. His first class was a small group of women and a couple of teenagers. They eyed him with caution, this towering figure with his dreadlocks, piercing blue eyes, and scarred forearms. But Blae proved to be patient, even gentle. He instructed them with the same focused care and deep respect he had once shown Ariana. He was driven by the simple conviction that every person had the right to feel safe in their own skin. His classes started to fill up. Within a year, he was teaching 5 nights a week. He taught kids from troubled homes who were desperate for direction, and women fleeing violent pasts who were searching for their strength. He taught veterans grappling with the aftershocks of war who just needed to feel like part of a team again. Blae discovered he was weaving himself into the fabric of something new. It wasn't a platoon or a military unit, it was a genuine community. Soon familiar faces started greeting him on the street. The man who owned the hardware store would set aside tools he thought Blae could use. The woman at the diner started giving him his coffee on the house. The town librarian would save books she knew he'd enjoy. They were small gestures, but they were real connections. And piece by piece, Blae began to put himself back together. It wasn't a perfect fix. The grief from losing his men was a scar that would never completely fade. But he was finally learning to carry the weight of it instead of letting it drown him. He'd even started to bring color back into his world. It began with the blue shirt she'd given him, the one that perfectly mirrored his eyes. Then came the forest green, the deep burgundy, each one a small rebellion against the man who only served, and a step towards someone who could actually live. And the woven ring never left his finger. Every single day for 3 years and a handful of months after that catastrophic day on the mountain, Ariana found herself in her boutique adjusting a rack of brightly colored shirts. Moss and Marshall had shattered all their wildest projections. They were running 3 successful stores in Seattle and were already scouting locations in Portland. Ariana had discovered a talent for design, for the craft of sewing, for the sharp instincts of running a business. She'd unearthed a strength in herself she never knew existed. Yet every success felt hollow, a silent achievement, because the one person she desperately wanted to share it with was gone. What she couldn't possibly know was that destiny was about to force their paths to collide in the most stunning way imaginable. A small bell over the door chimed, announcing a new arrival. "Welcome to Moss and Marshall," Ariana sang out on autopilot. "Just let me know if there's anything I can help you find." As a matter of fact, a familiar deep voice rumbled, "I am looking for something very specific." Ariana's heart hammered against her ribs. She turned almost in slow motion, and there he was, Blae, standing in her store as if he'd walked directly out of 1,000 painful memories. He looked different, yet unmistakably the same, still a mountain of a man, all muscle and raw power, still achingly handsome. His dreads were shorter, now pulled back in a cleaner, more deliberate style. He was wearing simple jeans and a dark green Henley that made the blue of his eyes catch fire, and he was staring at her with an intensity that spoke of a 3-year search. "Blow one," Ariana breathed. Ariana. They just stood there, the length of the store between them, feeling like a chasm filled with 3 years of pain, longing, and everything left unsaid. Ariana's gaze fell to his hands, and she saw it. The woven ring, its colors faded and threads worn from 3 years of time, but it was there, still on his finger. Her vision blurred with tears. "You kept it," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Never had a reason to take it off." Blae said, his voice low. Ariana moved toward him on unsteady legs, her mind struggling to accept that he was really there. When she was finally close enough to reach out, she hesitated, terrified that the slightest touch would shatter the illusion and he'd vanish. "What are you doing here?" she finally managed to ask. "Shopping for clothes." Blawan gestured vaguely at the displays. "Heard the quality here was second to none." The name caught my eye. Moss, it's what you called yourself. So I looked into it and realized it couldn't be a coincidence. You actually built this place. She gave a quick, jerky nod. Yes, my friend and I are partners. A flicker of something that looked like admiration crossed his face, but he didn't comment. His eyes swept the shop once before landing back on her. I am so sorry, Ariana said in a rush. I am so unbelievably sorry for lying to you. For all of it. I see that now. I should have told you who I was from the very beginning. I should have been straight with you about my father. I know, Blae said again, cutting through her apology. Ariana looked up, her expression filled with confusion. Then, why are you here? Because I've wasted 3 years being angry, being hurt, being a stubborn fool. Blae one closed the distance between them with a single step. And I'm done. I am so done waking up every morning wishing you were next to me. I'm done seeing something incredible and having my first thought be that I need to show you. I'm done living half a life just because my pride won't let me forgive. I don't deserve to be forgiven. You probably don't, Blae one conceded, but I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for me. Because that rage, it was poisoning me. And you're the one who taught me I deserved more than just to survive. So that's what I'm trying to do. Fresh tears streamed down Ariana's face. I cut him off, my father, 3 years ago. I couldn't. Her voice hitched. I couldn't be a part of that world a second longer. Not after what he orchestrated, not after I saw the real cost. I walked away from everything. Started this place. I built a life that wasn't funded by dirty money. Blae's harsh expression finally softened. You didn't need to do all that. Yes, she insisted, I did. It was the only way I could ever imagine being with you and not feel stained by guilt. Not feel like I was betraying you and every other person my father destroyed. Then why didn't you come find me? Blae one asked softly. After you left him, why didn't you ever come back? I was terrified. Ariana admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Terrified that you'd still despise me. Terrified that the sight of me would only bring all that pain rushing back. She was terrified it had been far too long. But then her eyes locked onto the band of metal on his finger. Seeing that ring on your finger, it makes me wonder. Maybe, just maybe, you don't despise me as completely as I believed. His hand moved toward her, slowly, deliberately giving her every chance to retreat. When she remained still, his palm cradled her cheek, his thumb gently sweeping away the tracks of her tears. Hate was never what I felt, he confessed, his voice low. I tried to. Lord knows I truly tried. But even in my deepest rage, even when the betrayal cut me to the bone, it was never hate. Then what was it, heartbreak? Blae's voice was frayed with emotion. You were the first person, the very first one who made me feel like I could actually live again. You made me see a world beyond just getting through the day. And when I lost you, it was like that entire world, that newfound hope, just vanished. I am so sorry. Don't, Blae said, his tone softening. Stop apologizing. You were 23 years old, terrified and on the run from people who wanted to snatch you off the street. Every choice you made was about staying alive. I see that now. It took me 3 long years to get here, but I finally understand. I love you, Ariana confessed, the words rushing out of her as if she could no longer hold them back. I think I've loved you since our time together on that mountain. Every single day since then has been filled with loving you. It's a love so intense it physically aches. God, Blae, I'm absolutely crazy about you. And then he smiled. It was that rare, breathtaking smile that completely remade his features. I love you too, he whispered before pulling her flush against his body, his words a low murmur against her ear. Not a single moment passed when you weren't on my mind. Honestly, I don't know how I made it this long without you by my side. A tremor ran through Ariana as raw desire thickened his voice. She molded her body to his, inhaling his unique scent, anchoring herself to his solid strength, scarcely believing this moment wasn't a dream. You're actually here, her voice was a muffled whisper against the fabric of his shirt. I'm here, and you came back for me. No, Blae said, easing back just enough to meet her eyes. You came back to you. This business, this life I built, it's all mine, completely free from my father's shadow. That kind of courage, well, I had a very good teacher. Ariana's gaze lifted to his, a ridiculously stubborn soldier who showed me that true strength and discipline are forged inside you, not handed to you by your situation. In that embrace, they stood letting the simple, profound act of being in each other's arms begin to erase 3 long years of distance. After a long moment, Blaze finally spoke. I've got a place in town. It's just a small apartment, nothing special. Can I see it? I was counting on you asking. Blaze's apartment was Spartan. Just a single bedroom, a compact kitchen, and a living space dominated by stacks of books and workout gear. But everything was immaculate, orderly, and held a sense of calm. And there on the main wall was a framed photograph of Blaze and his brother. Both of them were beaming, dressed in their military uniforms. You put it in a frame, Ariana murmured, her fingertips lightly grazing the edge. I used to hide from his memory, Blaze admitted, moving to her side. I had all his things packed away because the pain of seeing them was just too much. But you were right about what you said. Honoring his life doesn't mean I have to let mine end with his. It means living a life big enough for the both of us. He would have liked me, Ariana said wistfully. No, Blaze corrected gently. He would have loved you. He had a gift for seeing the good in people, a much better one than I have. He would have looked right past the choices you made and seen the person you have always been. They settled onto the couch, and Ariana tucked herself against Blaze's side, a gesture so natural it felt like coming home. Tell me about the last 3 years. Tell me everything, Blaze urged gently. I want to hear it all. So she did. She told him about the day she walked away from her father's mansion, about building her business from the ground up with destiny. She spoke of every setback and every triumph, and most of all about the difficult journey of discovering who she truly was once the money and the family name were stripped away. My father swore I'd never survive on my own, Ariana recounted. He gave me 6 months before I came crawling back to him begging. But you never did, he stated, his voice full of pride. No, she agreed, because you were the one who showed me I had a strength I never knew existed, that I could do more than just get by without all the finery. I could actually flourish. That a real life built on effort and enjoying the small things and genuine connections with people, that's worth more than all the money in the world. And your father now? We don't speak. He sends cards for birthdays and Christmas, but the note inside is always the same. It always says, when you're done with this little charade, your home is waiting. But I'm never going back. I can't. Not as long as he refuses to even admit what he did. Blaze tightened his hold on her. I'm sorry. I know that can't be easy. He's still your father. He chose his path. I chose mine. Ariana tilted her head back to look him in the eyes. I chose you. Even when I was sure I had lost you forever, I was still choosing the kind of life you opened my eyes to. Now it's your turn, Ariana insisted softly. What did you do after I was gone? So Blaze told her. He talked about finally coming down from the mountain, about finding a purpose teaching at the local community center, and about the kids there who had slowly become his surrogate family. He described the slow process of learning how to be part of the world again instead of just hiding from it. You managed to do what I never could on my own, Blaze admitted. You made me realize that walling myself off wasn't keeping me safe. It was just a slower way to die. So I finally took your advice. I started living again. For real this time. I'm so proud of you, Ariana whispered. I'm proud of us, Blaze corrected, his voice firm. We both had to become who we were meant to be on our own before we could ever find our way back to each other. For hours, they talked carefully, bridging the 3-year chasm between them, weaving back together the powerful bond that had first been forged on that lonely mountain. As twilight painted the sky outside his window, Ariana finally asked, Can I stay with you tonight? You can stay every night, Blaze answered without a moment's hesitation. For as long as you'll have me. And what if I want forever? A slow smile spread across his face. Well, in that case, I suppose I ought to do this the right way. Blaze rose to his feet, only to slowly lower himself onto one knee before her. The air rushed from Ariana's lungs. I don't have a ring. He started, his voice thick with emotion. This one, the one you made for me 3 years ago. But I'm calling you Ariana Shrewdman. Because yes, I'm using your real name this time. Will you marry me? And without a single heartbeat of hesitation, Ariana breathed, Yes, oh God, yes, yes. Blaze surged forward, sweeping her up from the couch and into his arms as his mouth found hers. It was the first time they had ever kissed. It was the culmination of countless training sessions that left them inches apart and gasping for air. Of all the smoldering moments they'd shared by the fire of 3 long, agonizing years of separation and relentless longing. And their first kiss was profoundly worth the wait. When they finally pulled away minutes later, both of them panting, their lips swollen and tender, Ariana whispered, We squandered so much time. No, Blaze countered, his voice low and certain. We needed every second of it. You had to become the woman capable of building an entire world from nothing. And I had to become the man who could stand to live in this one again. We had to grow into ourselves before we could ever grow together. When did you get to be so profound? She teased. He gave her a slow, knowing smile. I always was. You were just never quiet long enough to notice. A genuine laugh escaped her then, and she pulled him down for another kiss. She had been starved of this for far too long, and now that she could have it, she was utterly intoxicated by it. And judging from the fierce, possessive way Blaze responded, he was just as lost in the feeling. Much later, tangled in the sheets of his bed and securely wrapped in his arms, Ariana waited for her racing heart to calm. Before she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Do you think your brother would have approved? I think he'd just be happy that I finally stopped punishing myself and actually chose to live. Blaze rasped his own breathing, still uneven. I think he would have liked you. And I know for a fact he'd tell me I was the world's biggest idiot if I ever let you go again. Then don't let me go, she murmured. Never. Blaze vowed, his arm tightening around her waist like an anchor. And it was a promise he kept. 2 years later, the community center was a hive of activity. Ariana leaned against the back wall, watching as Blaze led a self-defense class packed with kids from every corner of Seattle. He moved between them with a quiet patience and an effortless authority, correcting their form, offering words of encouragement, becoming the steady, unshakable presence that so many of them were missing in their lives. Your husband is incredible with them, Destiny remarked, appearing at Ariana's side with 2 cups of coffee. He really is, isn't he? Ariana sighed, gratefully accepting the warm cup. Thanks for covering the shop so I could be here to see this. Are you joking? It's Friday. Friday is your designated husband day. That was our agreement. Somehow, against all odds, they had built a life that worked. Ariana was at the helm of Moss and Marshall during the week, while Blaze taught his classes most evenings. Fridays were reserved for them, along with the weekends when the store was closed. It wasn't always a simple life, but it was a real one, and a real life was infinitely better than a perfect one. After the class had officially ended, a little girl, maybe 10 years old, with her hair in cornrows and eyes full of light, shyly approached him. Mr. Blaze, can you show me that move one more time? The one where you twist your body to break their grip. Of course, Amani. Let's practice it together. Ariana watched as Blaze worked with the young girl, his massive, scarred hands moving with an impossible gentleness as he guided her through the proper technique, his voice a patient rumble as he broke down the mechanics. This was the man he was always meant to become. Not a soldier blindly following orders, and not a hermit hiding himself away from the world, but a teacher, a protector, a man who was using his own strength to help others discover theirs. When the center was finally empty, Blaze made his way over to where Ariana was waiting. How long have you been standing there watching me, he asked, pulling her into his arms. Long enough to see you completely make Amani's day. She's a good kid. She reminds me a lot of you, you know. Stubborn, fiercely determined, and talks a mile a minute. I do not talk a mile a minute, she protested. Blaze just arched an eyebrow. All right, maybe a little, Ariana conceded with a smile. But you secretly love it. I love you, Blaze corrected her softly. The constant talking is just part of the incredible package. They walked out of the community center hand in hand, disappearing into the cool Seattle evening. I received a letter from my father today, Ariana said quietly as they walked. Blaze's body tensed beside her. What did it say? The usual things, that he misses having me in his life, that he wishes I would reconsider my decision to cut him out of it. He said he was sorry that we can't see eye to eye, but not that he was sorry for what he did, she added. No, he's never sorry for that. Ariana let out a long sigh. I think I'll always hope that one day he'll genuinely acknowledge the part he played in everything that happened, that he'll finally take some responsibility instead of just hiding behind the excuse of following orders. But if he never does, I think I've finally made my peace with that. I have you, I have our business, I have a life that has meaning. Ariana gave his hand a tight squeeze. That's more than enough for me. They finally reached Blaze's truck. He'd finally replaced his old one with a newer model that actually had a working heater and didn't make terrifying grinding noises. Before getting inside, Blaze turned to face Ariana. Do you have any idea what today is, he asked her. Ariana thought about it for a second. Friday? 5 years ago on this very day, you came crashing into my forest wearing a bright pink designer dress and a pair of broken heels, all while being hunted by men with tranquilizer guns. Ariana's eyes went wide with shock. You remember the exact date. I remember every single detail about that day. I remember the way you grabbed onto my leg and begged me to save you. And I remember the way you followed me back to my cabin even after I told you to leave. And I remember the way you looked at me like I was some kind of hero instead of just a broken soldier, he finished. You were a hero, Ariana said, her voice soft. You still are. Blaze reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I know I didn't have a ring for you when I proposed, he said, his voice suddenly thick with emotion. But I wanted to give you something. He opened the box, revealing a stunning ring meticulously woven from thin strands of gold, its pattern a perfect match to the grass and twine ring Ariana had fashioned for him 5 years ago. Oh, Blae, Ariana whispered, her voice catching. It's perfect. I found a local artisan, he explained, his voice low as he took her hand. I showed him the one I made and asked him to forge it in gold. That first ring, the one woven from grass, that will always be my greatest treasure. But I needed you to have a promise you could hold on to forever. Something as enduring as us. Gently, he slid the gleaming gold band onto her finger, letting it settle beside the simple ring that already bound them together. A shimmer of tears welled in Ariana's eyes. You remembered, she murmured. I told you, he said softly. I remember every single thing. And there in the fading light of a Seattle sunset, they kissed. Two souls forged in chaos who had made a conscious choice day after day to belong to one another. Take me home, Blae, Ariana whispered against his lips. Which one, our city place or the cottage in the mountains? The cottage remained their sanctuary, a weekend escape from the city's noise. It was their touchstone, a constant reminder of the wild, fragile place where it all started. Surprise me, she replied, a playful glint in her eyes. In return, he gave her that smile, the real one, the one that reached his eyes, the one she had fought so hard to see again. The mountains, then, he declared. As the car turned eastward, leaving the glittering sprawl of the city behind them, Ariana's mind drifted back over the long, treacherous road that led them to this moment, a path paved with deceit and betrayal. A journey marked by searing pain and the agony of being torn apart. But it was also a path of transformation and redemption, built on the deliberate choice to love, even when it seemed impossible. And in that quiet reflection, a profound truth settled over her. She finally understood that the most difficult roads often conceal the most breathtaking views, and that sometimes you must be utterly lost before you can ever truly be found. She saw that real love demands an unflinching courage, the courage to stand in the wreckage of your own mistakes and not look away, the humility to plead for grace, and the resilience to rebuild yourself into someone who deserves another chance at happiness. While her father's empire was a monument to manipulation and hollow victories, Ariana had constructed a life from far stronger materials, honesty, effort, and unconditional love. And she knew with absolute certainty that her world was infinitely richer than his had ever been. What's going on in that beautiful mind of yours? Blae asked, his eyes briefly leaving the road to find hers. I was just thinking, she began, her voice steady, that I would endure it all over again. Every moment of fear, every crushing lie, every piece of my shattered heart. I'd walk through that fire 1,000 times if I knew it led me back to you. Even the moment I screamed at you, the moment I shattered your trust. Especially that, because it forced me to see that true love isn't some effortless fairy tale. It's messy. It demands brutal honesty, painful sacrifices, and endless forgiveness. But my God, is it worth the fight? Blae's hand found hers in the darkness of the car, his fingers lacing through hers. The golden ring caught the faint glow from the dashboard, a tiny star in the night. I love you, Ariana Shrewdman Bruce. Her reply was instantaneous, a breath of pure certainty. And I love you, Blae Bruce. And so they drove on deeper into the mountains toward the little cottage that held their history poised on the brink of their future. True strength isn't found in a life without errors. It's forged in the courage it takes to confront your failings and allow them to remake you. Both Ariana and Blae had been stripped of everything they thought they wanted, only to discover what they truly needed. They had to walk their own path of healing before they could finally walk the same one hand in hand. And they learned the most profound lesson of all, that forgiveness is not an act of weakness, but the highest form of power. Blae and Ariana had finally found their forever. Okay, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little misty-eyed over here. If this story resonated with you, let me know by writing "Choose Love" in the comments. And if you like me, believe in the power of a second chance, make sure you subscribe to this channel. And of course, if their journey taught you something valuable, hitting that like button lets me know it connected. Thank you for sharing in this incredible experience with me. Until we meet again, always remember it's not the falls that define us, but the choices we make when we get back up. So choose with wisdom, choose with courage, And above all, always choose love.